Hello. I'm going to talk about fermat primes, the sum of two squares, and mersenne primes. With James Tanton's crazy fractions, the additive part that he did in his video, breaks odd numbers into two groups. One group points out odd numbers that are potentially the sum of two squares, and the other group doesn't. But when I match it up with my sieve that I created, the lines that are potential primes and are potentially fermat primes, the sum of two squares, I went and checked all these up to the groups and up to 97 in the first 100, all the way to 9,900, such as this 9,901 is the sum of 10 squared plus 99 squared. But these squares ending in 1, their even squares can only end in 0, 4, or 6, but I don't use the 4s or 6 to look for them. I alternate between 10 squares and 5 square, any number ending in 5, because 10 square has two potential options ending in 9 or 1, and then 5 square has two potential options ending in 4 or 6. And that's because any number ending in 5 squared will become a number that ends in 5, and 1 minus 5 ends up 6, and then 4 squared or 6 squared becomes a number that ends up in 6, like 4 squared is 16, 6 squared is 36. And that's the only option for these numbers ending in 1. Even for 41, it'll be 5 or 0. Instead of brute forcing all the numbers, I just kind of brute force numbers ending in 5 or 0. And then numbers ending in 7, their odd squares will either end in 1 or 9, because 1 squared and 9 squared are numbers ending in 1, and 7 minus 1 ends in 6. So that means their potential squares will be 6s and 4s. And then odd numbers ending in 9, their potential squares will be 5 or 0, like I said. Or, no, they will be 5 or 0, just like the ones. Except instead of 5 squared plus 4 squared. The nines will be 5 squared plus 2 squared, or 5 squared plus 8 squared, a number ending in 8. Five squared plus 98 squared equals 9,629. And then if it ends in 0, the potential odd number will be end in 7. 3 squared becomes a 9, 7 squared becomes a 9. And then for 7 and for 13, any number ending in 3, the potential square will be, the odd squares will be 3 or 7, because 3 minus 9 will be a 4. So that means the even squares will either end in a 2 or an 8, because 8 times 8 is 64, 2 times 2 is 4. So if you give me a large prime, I can tell you if it's a fermat prime just by subtracting 1 and dividing by 4, but by knowing the last, if it is a fermat prime, depending on the last digit, I can give you a ballpark estimate of what the 2 squared numbers can be. If it ends in 3, the odd squares are either 3 or 7, and the even squares are either 8 and 2. And when I checked that, I checked against this, or I went ahead and did this one, which with this 5 square plus 4 square is 41, 61. The red panes are primes and the black ones where primes were not. But as you see, 4 square, 6 square, 14, 16, 24, 26, so on and so forth, all the way up to 96. And then on this side, these ones will only end in 1, because 4 and 6 will always be squares ending in 6, plus 5 squares ending in 5. Any number that has a 5 will end up being a squared number that ends in 5. And then for numbers ending in 9, it'll either be 2 square, 8 square. The even squares will be 2 or 8, but 10 also lines up with this, where 10 squared plus 1 square is 101. 20 squared plus 1 square is 401. I don't know if 401 is a prime. I think it is, but I haven't checked. But the 10s, when they end in 1, will either be, the odds will end in 1 or 9, or if the number ends in 9, the 10 will be followed by an odd prime that ends in 3 or 7. Or not odd prime, an odd square that ends in 3 or 7. But how I check to see if the mersenne primes lined up with any fermat primes was the last 2 digits of the current mersenne primes. So far, none of them have lined up with a fermat primes, because 91 has 3 rows are potentially ending in 91, but 1 will be completely canceled out, such as 291, because the digits sum up to being divisible by 3, and any numbers in in that row will all be summed up by 3, but 91 and 191 are rows that potentially house primes that end in 9-1. And I was only able to check the first 12 mersenne primes by seeing what row they end up in, which is subtracting the last 2 digits. If it ends in 27, you subtract 27, and then you add all the digits and divide by 3. If it has a remainder of 1, it's in 127. If it has a remainder of 2, it should be 227. Yep. Or not. Yeah, it'd be 127, these. And then the next one will be 227. Right here. So far, I've only been able to check up to the 12th mersenne prime, and the ones ending in 27 so far have all lined up in this row. I can't check beyond the 12th one because of the limited information I have access to, because the website doesn't have all the digits available. They omitted a chunk of them. But mersenne primes ending in 27 can only land in 127 or 227, and the ones ending in 27 within the first group of 12 have all landed on 127. I don't know if the other mersenne primes ending in 27 also land in 127. But thank you for listening. It'd be a cool fact if all mersenne primes ending in 27 line up in this row, but I don't have the computational power nor access to the data. I've been doing this all by hand. And I could probably add digits up, numbers with 1,000 digits, but when the digits have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, even millions of digits in them, I couldn't do that by hand. So there's a limit to how much I can do. Thank you for listening.